Good afternoon. You gave Roland Warren much more love than you gave me, so let's try it again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. See, I beat Roland, that's good. I served with Roland on the board of the National Fatherhood Initiative way back when, about 10 years ago, and I thought his comments were great. It's been amazing to watch your growth, brother, actually, over time. Fantastic. Todd, when running down my background, actually sort of made me scratch my own head, trying to figure out exactly, why am I here? Amongst a distinguished gathering of theorists, academics, public intellectuals, and in essence, I've spent most of my life in media, in popular culture. So, there used to be the segment on Sesame Street when I was young. It used to go like, one of these things is not like the other. Do you recall that? So that's sort of when I was sitting there, and as you were running down.
You're going to give us the answer, though.
It could be. Well, I'll give you a Sesame Street level sort of answer to, in keeping with who I am and what I do. So, I absolutely applaud Chairman Reynolds, for his vision for this conference, which, I echo the statements of Mr. Jones. I think this is actually historic because from what I understand, because I've been taking my notes in the back, that sometime in the 60s, there was a study about black families, and then all of a sudden, people decided not to talk about black families. So, as far as I know, beyond some of the good works on fatherhood, in terms of a public discussion of family structure, I think this is actually one of the first national efforts that we've ever had, at least from what I'm getting and gleaning from our conversation today. So I've been a prepared student for the intellectual and academic discourse. So, once again, I try and figure out why Chairman Reynolds would invite me here to address everyone, other than for the fact that after 25 years of working to essentially help destroy contemporary culture, that, that basically I'm here to help. Now, there are numerous definitions of culture. In keeping with what I do, I went to the computer, Wikipedia, and there was one from Merriam-Webster: the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group, the characteristics and features of everyday existence as diversions or a way of life shared by a people in a place or time. Further, there is another definition for popular culture. Popular culture, commonly known as pop culture, is the totality of ideas, perspectives, attitudes, memes, images, and other phenomena that are deemed preferred per an informal consensus within the mainstream of a given culture, especially Western culture of the early to mid 20th century. And in thinking about civil rights and how we've gotten to where we are today, how I've gotten to where I am today, given the fact that I was born to two African-American parents in the early 60s married, by the way, prior to the Moynihan Report, who, upon their marriage and wedding for their honeymoon, drove from New York to California for their honeymoon and stayed in segregated hotels. I was conceived, literally, within segregation. And some 2 years after my birth, 2 or 3 years, we wind up getting, as I've heard throughout the day, the report that our families were in crisis, some 45 years ago. So, it's interesting from my vantage point, having grown up during this crisis of the Negro family, to sort of analyze the changes in culture. And I think that many of those changes were probably affected by family structure, consistent with what's been discussed today. That affects everything. It affects film, television, music. I think about, as I look at our backdrop, a new era defining civil rights in the 21st century, I think about civil rights in the 20th century. And I think about how the civil rights movement during the mid-60s had a soundtrack. We shall overcome. In our business, We would call that a main title theme, like when you're watching a movie and you see the credits at the beginning and then you hear a song. That's usually the main title theme. So we had incredible main title themes that were informed by the politics of the day. Culture impacts politics and politics impact culture. We don't separate, I don't think. That's not been my experience. But now, you know, having worked closely with many young rappers and musicians during the past 25 years, I cannot overstate the amount of emotional and psychological damage that has been done to young men and women, but especially our young African-American men who've grown up not only in fatherless households, but also in essence, with our fatherless communities, adult male-less communities, neighborhoods devoid of men. Family structure, I believe, abhors a vacuum. Hence, gangs provide a perverse safety net for young people left without structure. Young men seem to have no faith in their own human potential and in their capacity to successfully navigate life. So they adopt a lifestyle informed by the values they've developed solely on their own in the hood, quote unquote, and without parental input and or authority. You know, one of the most famous rappers of today has become almost a billionaire. He made money off of endorsements, but his first CD sold millions, made tens of millions of dollars for the company that he records for. The title of his debut CD was Get Rich or Die Trying. So, you know, you perform a juxtaposition. You think we shall overcome in the mid-60s, prior to the literal destruction of family structure within these communities. And you fast forward some 45 years later, and you have young men who are rhyming and singing, get rich or die trying. And unfortunately, most perform the latter, not the former. And our young women have been terribly affected by fatherlessness and family structure difficulties. Many of our young women have no conception of adult male parenting, which to them is abstract at best and non-existent at its worst. And it often results in those young women engaging in unhealthy relationships with multiple men and a distorted view of the relevance of men to themselves, to their families, and to their communities. Now, after all of that, how do we turn all of this around? Now, you know, I know how to destroy, but I'm not so certain on how to build, other than I tap in perhaps into my own experience right now as a married father with 3 children. Just as quickly, very quickly, as a married father, as a married African-American father who moved his children from a school district where 600 kids attended the public school in which I had my oldest son. On back-to-school night, 6 parents showed up for the 600 kids. I moved to the suburbs into New Jersey, and I'll be quite frank, into a predominantly white, suburban, upper-middle class school district. And on the back-to-school night in that district, not only was the main room filled, but there were 2 overflow rooms that they had to stream video. In fact, it looked like the first week of Avatar opening, you know, and that's how crowded it looked. I'm not sure that government can negotiate or provide anything for that disparity, but I know what government can do. It has a bully pulpit, and it has the ability to engage us in conversation, has the ability to spur conversation, and, you know, even in the instance of what we're doing here, bring us to a point where we're melting, you know, the ice that we've had on the discussion for family structure. So I thank you very much for your time, and have a great conference and convention. Thank you.